Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're talking about the best teams for Arena. With the release of Skarlet, I think it's a good time to make one. There are many different comps people can use, and of course there are also some meta teams. Let's first discuss individual heroes, because some really excel at Arena and others don't. Some of note are Demia. She's a heavy protector against physical damage, which is quite popular in Arena. Ricardo, he is a heavy protector against magic damage, but he can also dispel enemy buffs. And we also have Jane with the Naked Jane or Coffin Jane strategy, and she must be at least T3 for that. And those are basically the tanks. For DPS, we have Nyx. He has high damage. He's a little RNG because he might not get his blade stacks quickly enough. We have Arch. He has some burst damage and shields when he dies. Tanya can clear an entire enemy team if left alive, if it's not a wall team. And Epis goes to the backline, a lot of damage. A Ricardo or a defensive Laius can counter her. And then we basically have the etc. heroes. Gao, he can solo tank, used for his cleanse and his CC heavy spin. Bao, 7-second shield, not as useful now that we have Skarlet. Leo, one of Bao's main counters, 0 mana dispel and silence. Of course, Skarlet, the counter to the Bao Leo team, can cleanse, dispel, and stun with one skill. Laius protects against magic, increases mana gain, paired often with Demia to make a wall team. Cassandra, fastest CC in the game, faster than Leo in equal gear. And Visca, she can be a solo tank with respectable damage. Main role is to mess up the enemy team's formation and cause chaos. So with this we have 14 heroes. Now we can discuss some popular team comps, and I'll share the one I use as well. My team has changed slightly since writing this script, but for the sake of it, we're going to go through it because I still think it's a good team, and I'll talk about the team I have now after that. So my team was Ricardo, Cassandra, Skarlet, and Nyx. I've been able to maintain top 50 challenger with an 85 to 90% win rate while doing around 20 battles a day. This is the EU server though, so that's something to keep in mind. While EU is about 4 months old now, and there's been plenty of time for many strong people to arise, it's still not as hard as the other servers. I'm not going to say I have the best team, but it is decent. Ricardo is in a bit of a filler spot for now, and he's actually the one I switched out. Side note, I needed him before I had Skarlet for his Dispel. He still helps deal with magic DPS enemies like Epis and Arch, but Demia would still probably help me more here, as Nyx is a very common pick. Speaking of Nyx, I also bring him along. He only has a 2-star unique weapon, but I decided to equip a ring on him. He still does good damage and is less likely to get one shot. Nyx is a good pick when he's T5 with his unique weapon. His blades pierce enemies, and when he gets blade stacks, he'll be hitting everyone with every attack, sometimes able to kill the enemy DPS very quickly. His second skill dispels who it hits, but the amount it hits depends on his blade stacks, so he's a very iffy dispeller. His third skill is extremely deadly, usually hitting most enemies for major damage. Next is Cassandra. She isn't a very common pick, but I really like using her even though I have a T5 Laius. Her quick silence at the beginning gives the whole party a nice attack speed boost, which my Nyx really enjoys. She can also sometimes stop a Leo from silencing or a Bao from shielding. And of course, Skarlet. She was really the final piece of the puzzle for me. Before her, I'd constantly switch out the 4th hero trying to find what works best, and here she is. I have Bao and Leo, but I never wanted to raise them. I knew I needed someone who was more reliable than Nyx and Ricardo to dispel Bao's shield, and of course Skarlet does that well, and more. I feel confident with this team. I know it can be better, but I'm satisfied with it. This specific team is weak to Demia, because my main damage will come from Nyx, followed by Skarlet. I've also had my ass handed to me by some Tanyas, as well as other Nyx. This team has no protection against physical, so I rely on burst from my own Nyx, as well as the CC from Skarlet, Ricardo, and Cassandra to keep them from doing anything too deadly. Replacing Ricardo with Demia and Cassandra with Laius would probably make my team stronger, but without Demia I don't see much of a point at the moment, and I don't plan to raise Demia just because I never really liked her. So anyway, off the script here for a second. The change made to my team was actually replacing Ricardo with Skarlet. I gave Skarlet tanky gear, and she actually tanks well enough to be the solo tank there, and I also put Mediana in, I guess, Ricardo's place actually, so kind of like a little switcheroo there. So now my team is Skarlet, Cassandra, Mediana, and Nyx. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but it's kind of a fun team. It's kind of squishy, but there is some like crit resistance going on there and all that, so it's working out decently well. I still use to Demias and Tanyas sometimes, but they're usually quick matches, so it's cool. Mediana's probably like the highest DPS priest, I would say, especially when you pair her in a full physical team already. So back to the script now. I was talking about if I were to replace my Ricardo with Demia and Cassandra with Laius, it would be a better team. And that's actually the first one we're going to discuss, which is Demia, Laius, Nyx, and Skarlet as a team. This gives your team a good amount of defense from both physical and magic damage, while having a good amount of damage yourself from Nyx, and being able to dispel, cleanse, and stun with Skarlet. Demia would counter any enemy Nyx or other physical DPS, Laius would counter any enemy Epis, if Laius' unique weapon were to be equipped with a couple of Tough runes, Skarlet would counter Bao and Leo teams, and of course Nyx would just be there to do damage. An enemy Arch might pose a problem, which brings us to our next team comp. Demia, Laius, Arch, and Skarlet. This is perhaps the closest thing to a real wall comp. You'll have physical and magic resistance, and you'll have physical and magic damage if your Skarlet is built as a DPS. This team may be weak to dispellers though, such as other Skarlets or Ricardo, since Arch is usually built full glass cannon so he dies quickly and gives everyone shields. A well-timed dispel will remove your shield, and your main source of damage will die with the next hit. Basically, Demia, Laius, Skarlet, and a DPS is a solid team. Many choose to go with Tanya as well, since she can basically just ignore the tank. If you're very confident in your DPS's damage, you can also go for the cheesy burst strats. These usually forego the tank and take a warrior like Skarlet or a tanky assassin like Tanya as their tank. Some pretty good cheese strats include heroes like Jane, Tanya, Nyx, Bao, Leo, Skarlet, Cassandra, and Arch. The Coffin Jane strat is probably one of the cheesiest ones I've seen recently. It's easily beaten with the Talisman Skarlet though. Basically, you take all gear off of Jane and take her T3 perk that stuns everyone for 3 seconds when she goes into her coffin. She is usually paired with Bao, Leo, and a DPS. The point is to CC lock you until you're dead. This also gives Bao enough time to cast his shield, but again, this strat is probably going to die off with Skarlet in the house. Replacing Bao with Skarlet may yield good results though. The next strat is basically just taking Skarlet by herself and laughing as the entire enemy team dies when you use her S2. Basically Skarlet, that's the best arena team. She's really good in arena. If you don't have one, you're pretty much at a disadvantage. I tried to call her the cancer curing princess, but I'm finding myself agreeing with those saying she is indeed the new cancer instead. She may be somewhat counterable with a well-timed cleanse from Gao, but then you may as well take Skarlet anyway. Skarlet versus Skarlet though, basically depends on who gets the S2 off second, which is weird, because it's usually the other way around. Since most of the top players already have Skarlet though, the other three are equally important. Ultimately though, at the end of the day, there are many teams that can work out. These are just kind of the meta ones, the ones I've seen work well, the ones I've seen have a high win rate. Just a lot of Demias, a lot of Skarlet. Skarlet is pretty much like a shoe-in. You just need Skarlet, so that's basically the point there. Of course, you could build a team to counter the meta teams, which I guess would include having some sort of magic DPS because Demias would be less of a problem. So, you know, you have to really think about that yourself, see who you're losing to and what you can improve in your team. It wouldn't be a good idea just to be like, okay, so I'm going to go buy Demia, Laius, Arch, and Skarlet now, and going to just raise them all equally until they're strong. Just look at your current arena team and see how you can make it a little bit better with maybe one new hero. If you don't have Skarlet yet, it's gonna have to be Skarlet. And, but that's pretty much it. I guess Skarlet, though, is more for, I guess, Masters and Challengers. I don't know how popular they are in the lower leagues, or how popular Bao and Leos are down there as well, because if you want to beat Baos and Leos, then you have to have Skarlet or Baos and Leos yourself, pretty much. I mean, of course, there are other dispellers and other ways around it, but she is the most efficient, all-round sort of counter to that team. But yeah, that'll do it. I know, again, there are probably some very amazing arena teams that I didn't even mention. Maybe there are even some heroes out of those 14 that I mentioned. Maybe there's one of them or two that I didn't mention that are just excellent. In some weird specific team composition you've seen, maybe Artemia. I've heard about some people building teams around her. You know, I don't know too much about that. I'm just kind of observing the meta and seeing what kills my team, what my team kills, etc, etc. So I'm just basing off personal experience and not about the entire world of King's Raid. So take that as you will, probably with some grains of salt, however that phrase goes. And yeah, that'll do it. Make sure to drop a comment down below if you want to share any comps yourself. What works, what doesn't work. You just leave it down there. Cool, everyone learns a little bit every day, I guess. And yeah, leaving a like would also be greatly appreciated if you did happen to enjoy. Thanks, as always, for watching, and until next time.